On his first night in his new countryside cottage, Simon was filled with relief. He had finally left behind the chaos of city life, a life that had drained him for years. The hustle and noise of the bustling city were now just memories, replaced by the serenity of Scotland's remote hills. But Simon's peace was about to be disrupted in a way he could never have imagined. Simon had always been a loner. As a child, he was energetic, curious, and often misunderstood. Growing up in a strict household, his father's harsh discipline left lasting scars. School and church weren't much better. Everywhere Simon turned, there seemed to be rules forcing him to suppress who he truly was. Over time, he learned to conform, hiding his anger and frustration behind a mask of obedience. Years passed, and Simon found himself trapped in a thankless job building ships. His boss was cruel, his co-workers exploitative, and his tiny apartment was a constant barrage of city noise. At 32, Simon decided enough was enough. He saved his earnings, left his job, and bought a cottage in the countryside where he could work independently and live in solitude. That night, Simon lay in bed, breathing deeply, ready for the kind of rest he hadn't felt in years. As sleep began to take hold, his thoughts turned hazy, and he drifted into the early stages of slumber. Then, suddenly, thud, Simon's eyes shot open. He sat upright, his heart racing. Had he imagined it? It sounded like something heavy hitting the floor. He got up, checked the windows, and peered outside. Nothing. The hills surrounding his cottage were still, illuminated only by faint starlight. Dismissing the noise as a figment of his imagination, Simon returned to bed. Just as he was falling asleep again, thud, thud. The sound was louder this time. It wasn't his imagination. Simon's breath quickened. He grabbed a wooden stick from his closet and began checking the house, room by room. Upstairs, downstairs, nothing seemed out of place. Finally, he reached the basement door. He hesitated, his hand trembling as it grasped the handle. Slowly, he opened the door and descended the creaky wooden stairs. The basement was dark and cold, filled with crates and old tools. Everything seemed normal. But then, Simon noticed a small wooden hatch in the corner. He didn't remember seeing it before. As the hatch swung open, a plume of black smoke erupted, mingled with flashes of light. Simon stumbled backward, his makeshift weapon falling to the ground. From the smoke emerged a shape, dark, fluid, and otherworldly. It moved with an unnatural grace, its form shifting between shadow and substance. Simon froze, his mind racing. Was this real? Or was it a hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Before he could make sense of it, the creature lunged. Simon bolted up the stairs, out the front door, and into the night. He ran until his legs gave out. The shopkeeper nudged Simon awake. Disheveled and frantic, Simon burst into the store. "I need a weapon," he demanded. The shopkeeper, unfazed, pointed him toward a display of swords and axes. Simon purchased a heavy sword and returned to his cottage, determined to reclaim his home. This time, he was prepared, or so he thought. As the hatch opened and the smoke billowed out, Simon swung his sword wildly. But the creature was unfazed. It dodged his every move with ease. Overwhelmed, Simon fled once again. Simon's attempts to fight the creature became a nightly ritual. He tried different weapons, drank more of the elixir to dull his fear, and convinced himself that he just needed to try harder. But no matter what he did, the creature remained untouched. His once peaceful home descended into chaos, cluttered with broken weapons and bottles. His life was consumed by a battle he couldn't win. One morning, exhausted and desperate, Simon asked the shopkeeper for advice. "What does the creature want?" the old man asked. Simon was taken aback. "I don't know. It's a monster. Monsters don't want anything." The shopkeeper leaned forward. "Everything wants something. Have you tried talking to it?" That evening, Simon decided to try something different. He left his weapons outside, ignored the elixirs, and approached the hatch with nothing but his resolve. As the smoke rose and the creature emerged, Simon stood his ground. In a steady voice, he asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" The creature paused, its shadowy form shifting. Then, for the first time, it spoke. "I want to exist, to be seen." Simon realized the creature wasn't an invader. It was a part of him, a manifestation of his fears, his anger, and the pieces of himself he had tried to suppress. Instead of fighting it, he began to listen, to understand. In the end, Simon found peace not by defeating the creature, but by accepting it. His home became his sanctuary once more, not because the monster was gone, but because they had learned to coexist. Sometimes the battles we fight aren't meant to be won. They're meant to teach us how to understand ourselves.